Horror as a genre is a favorite of mine. I've seen countless horror films, some of which are among my favorite movies of all time. I think the genre as a whole deserves a lot more credit than it is ever given. Horror manages to intrigue me for a few reasons. The first of which is what the boogeyman is. What does this movie use to scare me? Whether the thing I'm meant to be afraid of is matter or mind means a lot. Is the scare situational, like in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where I'd need to wander out of my comfort zone in order to get cannibalized? Or is it something that could happen to any of us? A dark figure looming in the shadows, peering in through the window. Michael Myers lurks through Haddonfield, killing indiscriminately. The way the film, novel, or what have you employs this threat really speaks to me. But more than that, what does the creator have to say? Is there a greater theme, or is it nothing more than entertainment just meant to scare us? Both of these can lead to great results, don't get me wrong. I think as long as the final product is good and can stand on its own, it doesn't really matter if it's deep or not. I'll take my terrifiers along with my saws. Thank you very much. What interests me is how the story carries this theme, if any, and how it's communicated to the audience. Unlike other genres which can be more overt, horror has to work a bit harder to demonstrate its core theme. And this is what makes it fun for me to watch. I don't really get scared by horror often, but despite this, it manages to be one of my favorite genres. Unless we're talking about Skinamarink, that is the one that got me, but that's for another day. Today, I want to talk about 2014's Creep, a delightful departure from your typical found footage experience. Creep is, well, creepy, but it's not creepy due to your typical horror conventions. It's no bloodbath and it's not full of jump scares. It's a lot more subdued than that, allowing the tension to build throughout its runtime, leaving viewers to really think about the events they're seeing. Creep makes excellent use of perspective, which helps it stand out when compared to other found footage films. Despite the genre being more or less defined through this almost confrontational perspective, Creep manages to feel even more personal. Creep demonstrates the power of perspective and turns the unassuming into a true nightmare. This video will contain spoilers for the film, so if you'd like to tap out, you can do so immediately after my quick summary. Trust me, this is a much better experience unspoiled. And while I have your attention, if you haven't yet already, take a moment to subscribe and like the video. Do you have a found footage favorite? Or do you think the genre is just cheap and ineffective? Either way, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Alright, enough chit chat. Let's get into it.
Peach Fuzz, I am here.
Okay, so, what is Creep about? To give a brief rundown, it follows a man as he takes a job to record a dying man's memoir to his unborn son. Aaron, the man behind the camera, took this job on a whim off Craigslist, and as we'll see throughout the film, this simple job turns into something much more. The genius of Creep comes in twofold. The first element I'd like to talk about is the usage of perspective. Creep makes excellent use of its medium, as it goes further than other films in the genre to create a personal connection. It works overtime to make viewers feel as if they're experiencing these events alongside Aaron, and due to this relationship, the other genius element of the film shines through. The internal reflection it gives way to. Creep is one of those films where you find yourself taking it all in after the credits roll, as it gives its viewers something to truly think about. How we as humans evaluate those we come into contact with. The film delves into the unknown, weird side effects of human interaction. Is it enough to trust people blindly? Or do we need to follow some sort of instinct, some innate danger sense that warns us that someone may not be who they seem? For this video, I'm going to break up these two elements and dive into each of them, beginning first with the film's usage of perspective. To start, I feel like we should discuss what perspective means in the context of Creep. With your average film, it is being presented to you as unambiguously fake, pure fiction. As the viewer, you are not an active participant in this story. The film is brought to you courtesy of a director, producer, and so on. This doesn't mean that found footage is the only genre that can work with perspective, but in this instance, it is able to build a stronger, more personal connection with its viewers. Creep and its contemporaries ask viewers to put themselves in the shoes of whatever kind soul brought them this footage. In Creep's case, how are we shown the events of the film? This is key. The entirety of the film is shown through videos recorded by Aaron, our lead character. We see the events of the film through his eyes, and this creates a bond with him. We are partially complicit in his actions, for better or worse. During the film's early moments, we're able to have a more subjective look, and may take notice of Joseph's strange behavior. His insistence on jump-scaring Aaron, his fascination with his wolf mask Peach Fuzz, and his start and stop demeanor, they all stand out. And while we, the viewer, may have considered walking away, ultimately, that's no longer our choice. This usage of perspective is fascinating and works really well to create a unique sense of dread and tension. Imagine if you were to take American Psycho, but restructure it by changing its perspective. Instead of following Patrick as the central figure, the one whose point of view we see, the film instead follows one of his victims. This whole film feels off, but nothing out of the ordinary. It leaves whether Joseph is a threat or not up in the air. Of course, if you have any prior knowledge on the film, you know this isn't going to end well. But that's okay, because even if you know Joseph's intentions or what happens at the end, the film never choreographs it. It doesn't hold a neon sign next to Joseph that says, "He will kill you." Instead, the film actively works against this. Creep tries to make itself as unassuming and mundane as possible. Just an average day with a somewhat weird man. That is, until Joseph's first major slip. After the duo finish their trek through the woods, Joseph decides to treat Aaron to lunch. The two go to a diner that Joseph had mentioned on their walk. During lunch, Aaron asks Joseph for a recommendation, to which Joseph sort of tenses up. Now, why would he freeze up if he had been here countless times before? Up until this point, Joseph's behavior has been strange, for lack of a better word. He has this almost childlike demeanor as he can be seen running around and trying to jump scare Aaron. Not to mention, practically minutes after Aaron first agreed to record this memoir, Joseph jumps right to taking a bath. Fully naked, mind you. All of these actions are admittedly bizarre, but none of them would really imply that this man is lying about who he is or what he does. The things Joseph does aren't really scary or too out of the ordinary. They're just weird. This decision to tie the line of concerning and cringe works great towards Creep's goal of maintaining a neutral attitude, leaving the intentions of Joseph's actions ambiguous. Based on the story he gave, he's clearly a man who has been through his fair share of trauma. Joseph is confronting his own mortality with the possibility that his son will be born with him no longer alive. Life hasn't exactly been fair to old Joseph. So, with all of this in mind, both Aaron and the viewer can sort of excuse his unique behavior. Until this slip at the diner. This is the moment where Joseph first let the guys slip, and where that focus on perspective comes in. As the viewer, you may have picked up on this. Ultimately, though, we are not Aaron. We're nothing more than a fly on the wall. We can look at everything he has done with subjectivity, but for Aaron, these instances are sprinkled throughout an otherwise normal day. Thus, it makes it a lot harder for him to have recognized Joseph's slip in demeanor here. From this moment on, the tension truly begins to ramp up for the viewer. Creep creates a divide between the viewer and Aaron in one way, but furthers the connection in another way just in a bit. The viewer's bond with Aaron would be solidified during the climax of the night as we arrive at Joseph's house. After displaying erratic behavior and confessing to committing an atrocious act on his wife, Joseph drinks until he passes out. In this brief respite, Aaron finally snaps. He now realizes the situation he has found himself in. Something is wrong with Joseph. Frantically, he hunts for his keys. His struggle and our fears have now unified. Aaron is in danger, and he needs to get out now. This tension is then kicked up even further after he answers a phone call from Joseph's wife. As Aaron huddles up in the bathroom, trembling like a child in fear of the boogeyman, he speaks with Joseph's wife. Except, that's not Joseph's wife on the phone. Angela, Joseph's sister, tells Aaron that he is in danger and he needs to leave. She doesn't mince words or over-explain the situation that he is in. She simply states he needs to leave. Now. This scene is brilliant for a number of reasons. As I mentioned previously, this is the moment where the connection between Aaron and the viewer is realized. Both parties are on the same page now. Aaron is no longer recording this footage just for the sake of Joseph's memoir. He is recording it to use as evidence in case he finds himself in even worse danger. This justification to keep the camera rolling here, and later down the road as the film progresses, is just super satisfying. A common pitfall that found footage falls into is not giving a justifiable reason for seeing the events that transpire. Think, if your life was in immediate danger as it would seem, it's hard to suspend that belief. Put the camera down and run. But Creep makes a case for it, and I just love that. Creep makes it believable. Furthermore, the dialogue is airtight. Joseph's sister doesn't magically explain the situation or what's wrong with her brother. She just matter-of-fact tells Aaron, "You are in danger. You need to leave." This all works not to undermine the tension and mystery that will hang over the rest of the film. If we were to simply get an answer that Joseph is a killer or he just has some specific condition, it would kill the momentum. Joseph has no backstory, no motivation, nothing. After Aaron manages to escape, the film takes a second before cutting to personal recordings made by him. His mental health is spiraling as he tries to make sense of what happened to him. He's losing sleep and having nightmares about Joseph. Not just this, but Joseph has begun to taunt him by sending him packages. Each of these personal recordings by Aaron paint the picture of a man who is clearly not okay after that encounter. He's declining rapidly, but in spite of all the warning signs, against all better judgment, Aaron puts aside his reservations and goes to a public park to meet with Joseph. One last time. As the viewer is drawn closer to the screen due to the personal connection formed with Aaron, the tension rises to its utmost highest. Aaron sets his phone down, retreats to the park bench, expecting to have a nice sit down with Joseph to finally just clear the air and... Following this scene, we get perhaps one of the best 1-2 hits in cinema. First, there is the almost impersonal slaying of Aaron. No dramatic sting of music, no cuts, just us, watching on as the man we spent this film with is killed. Helpless and naive. Then, as if to enact a final blow on the audience's psyche, Joseph turns the camera around onto himself, removing the agency from the viewer the way he had similarly been in control the whole time with Aaron. Everything we saw was because of Joseph. And in these final moments, he shows off a collection of tapes, each with a different name. As with everything else in Creep, the implications speak the loudest here. Everything comes together in the end. Joseph was sizing Aaron up, viewing him as nothing more than prey. The minute Aaron steps onto Joseph's property, he notices the axe stuck in the stump. And this was no coincidence, as evidenced by the sequel, which, by the way, is also a great film, probably even better than this one. Very worth your time. Go watch that too. Each moment that follows pushes the envelope further and further, pushing both the comfort of Aaron and the viewer. The pictures that Joseph had taken to be used as a memoir so that he would never forget Aaron's face. The tape of him burying a body, it wasn't just an empty threat. With the perspective now flipped, it's easy to see that Aaron was in danger from the very start. There was no peace. There was no safety. Joseph was a literal wolf in sheep's clothing. The use of perspective in Creep isn't the only impressive aspect of the film. As I said earlier, the film does a great job at looking at how we view others. As humans, how we evaluate ourselves, others, and the dangers that people can present. How far are we willing to give the benefit of the doubt before it becomes too much? Creep tackles this through its use of ambiguity. Never once until the very end does it directly state that Joseph is a killer. His behavior is odd and erratic, and his sister informs Aaron that he is in danger. But the film never directly states Joseph is a killer in any sense. And while this may seem like a small detail, I'd say it goes a long way. Joseph is our central figure here, the one we spend the entire film looking at. Our eyes are trained on him throughout the runtime of the film. Similar to films like Skinamarink and Funny Games, focusing on something for extended periods can produce palpable tension and horror. As humans, we're already vigilant of how others act, and Unless you're spoiled on the events of the film, it's hard to narrow down Joseph's true nature. Even in his delirious, drunken state, he does not break the facade. While asleep, he muses about his silly peach fuzz mask, which, again, is weird, but it does not directly pose a threat. Take this scene, for example, and look at how Joseph is framed. He is shrouded in darkness. The only light source in the scene is a dimly lit porch light. Joseph is truly menacing here, as he towers above Aaron. During this scene, he manipulates the conversation to his favor and invites Aaron in for drinks, something he was already skeptical about, but eventually agreed to. This scene is truly horrifying, but the main horror comes in hindsight. Looking back on this after the credits roll and realizing that this was one of many, many warning signs. And while it may seem like Aaron should have just ran in that moment, his decision to come inside almost feels justified. Maybe Joseph isn't that bad of a guy. Maybe he just desperately longs for some human connection, to talk to someone who isn't just his wife or his coworkers. Joseph puts on a pitiful display later on in the film too, and this all just paints a complicated picture. Is Joseph actually a sympathetic figure? Just a poor soul tortured by mental illness, one who tries and tries to connect with others only to scare them away? Or is he something worse? A cold and calculated killer, someone capable of taking another life, capable of, I don't know, sending tapes of his murders to taunt a future victim? Creep has viewers come to their own conclusions on Joseph right until the very end, when his true colors are revealed. The conclusion we may have come to is different from what Aaron decides. And that right there is how Creep builds intrigue. The film wouldn't be half as interesting if Aaron had just decided right then and there that Joseph is dangerous. I mean, after all, we'd never get that wonderful yet bleak send-off at the park. The film even calls the naive yet good-willed nature of Aaron into question. When Joseph faces the camera, he makes note that Aaron was one of the good ones. Joseph consciously gave Aaron several red flags, instances that should have scared him off or clued him into his true colors, yet Aaron never backed down. Joseph even taunts him with his second tape, goading him to take his frustration out on the plush. His insistence here adds to the inner reflection that both Aaron and the viewers are going through. Joseph spins the situation onto Aaron, making him question if he could have lashed out, if he could take a life. Joseph knowingly spread clues throughout the film of who he was, ones that are easier to pick up on as a viewer than as Aaron. They serve a sort of ironic purpose, that special flavor of dramatic irony. I also want to clarify that these clues don't undermine what I said earlier about Creep not choreographing that Joseph is a killer. I believe that these breadcrumbs that Joseph left work so well because they aren't him just being like,
"Look, I kill people, I'm crazy,"
every 5 minutes. They're a lot more subtle, more ambiguous, and they help further the introspection viewers will do as the credits roll. It is ultimately Aaron's sincerity that led to his death, and this stands out to me. Unlike other horror films where it tends to be stupidity, recklessness, or factors outside of the victim's control, Creep looks at something else. It asks us to look inward and sympathize with Aaron. It's easy to say, oh, why didn't he just turn around? Or, he never should have given Joseph another chance. I wouldn't have done that. But the timeline of events and the way the film is framed show that it isn't quite that simple. If the same sequence of events happened to one of us, we may have only noticed the signs when it was too late. As we reach the end of another video, I just want to take a second and thank everyone who has made it to the end. If you haven't yet already, consider taking a second to subscribe and hit the notification for future videos. Notification bell. This one was a bit of a departure from my normal stuff, as you can see. I've really been struggling with writer's block and all sorts of other things that are out of my hands. Life stuff, So I cooked this video up as sort of a breather, sort of an exercise. Creep is a great movie, and the sequel is honestly even better. I'm a huge horror fan and film person in general, so if you like the video, then let me know, and I'll consider making more stuff about movies, horror, or both. Any feedback is greatly appreciated, since it helps me really gear my videos towards a better direction. Yeah, and one last thing, but here is where you can find me outside of YouTube. Look, there I am. That's me. Alright, that just about does it then. Once again, thank you for watching. It's been Noyah. Bye.